Welcome to this webinar. My name is Guy Lonsdale from Scarpos, and we handle the management of the open calls for the Fortissimo 2 project. I could maybe remind everybody to go on mute while we're presenting, and then unmute if you've got questions later. If there are questions, please do interrupt, and I'm happy to take any questions about any of the topics. What I will do is give you an introduction to the Fortissimo project, and then the Fortissimo 2 project, and then the specifics for the open call. But we'll see that as we go ahead. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the screen. Okay, please shout if not.
Guy, there is a gray box on the right side that is partially blocking content.
Okay, is this now better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, those are the WebEx boxes that I had up. So okay, I can't see any chats or anything. So if people want to chat, I won't see it at the moment. But please just interrupt on audio. So we're going to be talking about Fortissimo, which is a project under Framework 7, and then the current project Fortissimo 2, and I'll explain how those two projects overlap and have some common activities and some different activities. And both of those projects belong to the activities known as I4MS, ICT Innovation for Manufacturing SMEs. I think all of you will know I4MS because you've entered into this webinar via their webpage, so you registered via I4MS. But Fortissimo 2 belong to the I4MS activities and the group of projects coordinated in the umbrella of I4MS. I4MS itself is part of the Factories of the Future initiative. So I4MS and the Fortissimo projects are funded by the European Commission under their program, which is guided by the public-private partnership Factories of the Future. So that's how all this fits together. We have, as I already mentioned, as I've just seen, two ongoing projects. We will often just refer to Fortissimo, but formally we have two separate funded projects. Fortissimo started in 2013 and will complete at the end of this year. And as in the case of Fortissimo 2, it's all about business relevant investigations and looking at services that can be used in a Fortissimo HPC cloud. The focus there in HPC cloud is on HPC, so we're looking at providing access to high performance computing for the benefits of industry. And Fortissimo focused very much on benefits for manufacturing SMEs. Fortissimo 2 is somewhat broader. It's looking at engineering and manufacturing, SMEs and mid-caps. Fortissimo is funded under the 7th Framework Programme. Fortissimo 2 started at the end of last year and is funded on the first I4MS call of Horizon 2020. And it's not just a continuation of the same thing. There is a different focus for Fortissimo 2. Again, we're looking at business potential or experiments that help us to generate an ecosystem for HPC cloud services. But to emphasize the fact, the applications are those that involve simulation of coupled physical processes or high-performance data analytics. Under HPDA, you can understand big data meets HPC. And we'll go more into the details of what we're looking for later. But before I do that, I'd like to, some of you I've seen in the list already know the Fortissimo project, but I'd like to explain what the targets were and what's being achieved in Fortissimo, because the sort of business benefits that you'll see are those that we're targeting in successful experiments within Fortissimo 2. So this slide shows the goal and ambition of Fortissimo as a whole. And that goal is to provide SMEs and mid-caps with easy and cost-effective access to advanced simulation services. And we're using cloud infrastructure or cloud technology to provide access to HPC resources. And those resources are not just hardware. So obviously there's the HPC infrastructure, but it also means software applications, applications as services, expertise and tools, so consulting around the topic of advanced simulation services. And the ambition that Fortissimo has is to become the portal of choice for accessing HPC expertise and services in Europe, so delivered by Europe's major HPC technology providers. This picture you'll see again later, it shows you the sort of interactions that we expect between different players in the marketplace, but also between the players or the participants in an experiment. So this interaction on end user centric, and all these other players meeting the needs of those end users. So you have, of course, HPC infrastructure service providers and HPC experts, but also application experts, and then software vendors or research software providers, and they are all brought together to meet the needs of end users. And that picture we'll see again, that's the sort of, when we say that each experiment should be self-contained and include all the necessary players, this is the picture we have in mind. And from a whole set of activities in such clusters, end-user-centric clusters, what we want to develop in Fortissimo, we are developing, is a marketplace of services, and the target is to provide simulation as a service. And that simulation as a service builds on top of HPC platform as a service, and then all other resources that are linked to that. Support facilities, consultancies, business containers, the possibilities for SMEs or mid-caps to put bring their own services into the marketplace and offer them to other users. Matchmaking and registry of competences and available services, and all built on HPC infrastructure. So that's the big picture of the marketplace that we are developing in Fortissimo, and we wish to develop as a sustainable entity. The machines you see here are not all up to date. I must apologize for not having updated the slide, but you do see the various HPC centers included in the Fortissimo HPC cloud. And this is relevant because what we expect for the new experiments is that they will be using one or several of those systems. So bear in mind that these are the systems, these are the HPC centers that you should be working with. So what does success in a Fortissimo context look like? We believe Fortissimo has already been a major success and is continuing to be so. What does that mean for us? Well, it means that we hope to have over 50 successful experiments completed and delivering real business impact for the SMEs involved. So showing that HPC really can deliver business impact. And one of the major parts of that, and that's why we're talking today, is that the project has provided core services and the open calls to bring in these experiments to deliver those business impact stories. The vital statistics for the project as a whole, well, it will have approximately 22 million euros costs, and will receive 60 million euros funding from the European Commission. It's a very large project, but having said that, it's compartmentalized. The experiments themselves are to a large extent self-contained, supported by the core services. So the experiments are operating in their framework, but overall, there are a lot of partners, approximately 130 partners, a large number of SMEs, and 14 core partners. And in total, we have 53 experiments. And as I said, they're sort of small, self-contained. Each of those experiments has typically between 3 and 5 partners, and the funding received for each experiment lies between 180,000 to 250,000 euros. We had a lot of demand within Fortissimo for the 2 open calls. We ran 2 previous open calls year before last, and we had a very high response to those. We had 65 proposals in the first call, 82 in the second, and we believe feedback shows that we're actually able to run these using the EC best practice approaches. We have some arrangements for the SMEs in Fortissimo, SMEs and in Fortissimo 2, that will be SMEs and mid-caps, and that within our consortium agreement, we're able to a certain extent, protect knowledge inside within an experiment. So there's a sort of IP bubble around experiments. I'll give you a few examples of success stories, and the main purpose is to point out the sort of impact we're looking for. The European Commission is also very keen to hear that we can deliver concrete success stories, not in terms just of technical competence or technical results, but what does it mean for the user. So I'll show you a number of success stories looking at what can be delivered for SMEs. This case is a light aircraft manufacturer in Slovenia, and what they've been able to do is to accelerate their design cycle. So they can transform the design cycle, and they can be both cheaper and faster by using external resources. So it's not about which CFD model did they run, but the fact that they could actually perform the design faster and cheaper. Here's a manufacturer or steel manufacturing example. They were interested in using HPC simulation to minimize loss of material, and this is minimizing slag in the process, so reducing loss. And through improved simulation leading to improvements in operative approaches, they could actually, for a typical steel manufacturer, see that they'd be reducing loss by about 6,000 tons of steel per year. And that meant that they could see a saving between 420 and 600,000 euros per year. Another engineering or application, Texas Controls, is a Spanish SME, and what they offer is services for tightening and sealing of very large petrochemical or other industrial plants, and the flanges that are involved in piping. Oops, sorry. And they used HPC simulation to design the processes for operational processes for tightening such very huge flanges on piping. And what they were able to do was to lead to a 33% time saving. That's a reduction in manpower cost, a reduction in the downtime of the equipment, and that meant that their end user savings, for a particular end user, that would be 180,000 euros savings for one tightening operation, and that they can then estimate would lead to over 5 million euros savings for Texas customers by them using this new technology. It's not just about heavy engineering or heavy engineering or automotive and classical applications, but also urban planning is a case where engineering type simulation be used to offer new services. So IES is a Scottish SME offering simulation packages for use in the building industry, the construction industry, and what they were able to do was
offer the computational services as services to their customers. Their customers didn't actually realize that they had an option to use HPC in the background, and what they were able to show that compared to being able to offer such services in-house, they saw a 50% reduction in costs by using external services in the Fortissimo HPC cloud. A more classical example, an exotic case, this is Koenigsegg is an SME which designs and manufactures high-performance sports cars. As you can see from the physical advantage that they gain through using CFD, they were able to have design improvements at rather high speeds. I don't think many of us typically drive at 440 kilometers an hour, but that is their market segment. Those are the design goals they have, increasing performance of their product by using HPC-based CFD. And again, compared with what they were already using, they could, by using HPC CFD, they can reduce the time, the design times, and reduce the time to market. So again, a business impact for them. All in all, what we see is there is a strong demand for the type of services and the type of approach being offered by Fortissimo. SMEs new to HPC, there's a learning process. There's a phase where they're supported in using HPC. That's why the resources in Fortissimo are also consulting and expertise and not just infrastructure hardware. But if you can do that, then you can actually see real benefits. So there's a direct impact on manufacturing costs, product quality, and in many cases, growth of those companies and jobs that they can provide. And what Fortissimo is going to do is our next steps and where we're in process is to deliver an open, sustainable marketplace for such services. I recommend that you, on the web page, this brochure that's shown here is available, and there are many other business success stories that you can read there. So that gave you an introduction to Fortissimo. But it's Fortissimo 2 that we're now talking about in terms of what are its targets and the open calls that we will be running, and that's what this webinar is about. The very first of the open calls has been announced, and we'll go into deadlines later. As I already mentioned, Fortissimo 2 is funded under the first of the I4MS Horizon 2020 calls. It's an innovation action. That's important, an important point when it comes to the funding. When you'll hear later, we will be providing funding for third parties, but in line with the Horizon 2020 funding regulations. So please do look at the funding regulations for innovation actions. Fortissimo 2 is a 3-year project started in November. We will have, we expect to receive approximately 10 million euros funding. A large part of that will be applied to the 2 open calls with a total funding of 5 million euros. So, coming now to the objectives of Fortissimo 2 Call 1. It's a competitive call. So your proposals will be evaluated by independent external evaluators, and we will be able to fund the top-ranked proposals over threshold in line with the available budget. So it is a competitive call, and it has a particular focus. In line with those of Fortissimo 2, the focus is on modeling and simulation of coupled phenomena and high-performance data analytics. So your proposals will need to be aligned with that focus. That's part of the objectives. Those objectives will be used to define the impact that the experiments would have when we do the evaluation. So very important, your proposals should be looking at one or both of those topics. And the other thing is that we want to augment the current set of experiments and of course those in Fortissimo. So we don't want to replicate or extend current experiments. And they should all be driven by the needs, business needs of engineering and manufacturing, SMEs and mid-caps. I should perhaps at this point out that we have not defined the terminology mid-cap. There are a number of definitions used by the European Commission. Partly they're used in the work program without definition, but it's not intended to reflect the financial definition you may see if you Google that or you look at that on Wikipedia. Essentially, you should think of mid-caps as being not very large enterprises. So it's companies that don't satisfy the requirements for being an SME, so they're larger than that. Are they larger in terms of turnover and number of employees? But it would be not the huge companies, not the, I'm not going to pick any names, but you imagine a very large, huge enterprise, then it's not those that we're targeting, but smaller companies, but which may still be large, but obviously that they would have a need for accessing external HPC resources. So that would be a good guideline. If a company can really clearly demonstrate that in-house resources are not available and that they can have real benefits, then it would be useful to bring them into the experiment. Key aspects of the objectives. Priority will be given to experiments driven by the needs of first-time HPC users. So that, by implication, means it would be organizations engaging in Fortissimo for the first time. And beyond that, we really expect that experiments should develop clear exploitation plans and looking at business impact and wider use of services and technologies that they develop in the experiment. And we would expect the experiment should also investigate whether or not they can deploy services in the Fortissimo marketplace. So these key aspects will be provided to the evaluators, and they will be using these to assess the potential impact of the experiment or the proposed experiment. I mentioned complementarity. Just so that you have the full picture, the first 3 slides show you the topics being addressed in the Fortissimo project. So we had original set of experiments, then those that came out of our first call within Fortissimo, which was broader, an enhanced focus on manufacturing, and then in the second call we had we would look explicitly not just manufacturing engineering, but particularly manufacturing applications, and you see that focus in the third call. We have quite a lot of industrial sectors. If I go back, it's not just automotive and aerospace, although those are included, but new industries with or different with magnetic smart materials. Quite a number looking at the maritime industry, so naval architecture or so on. And if we now look at what we have inside the initial set of Fortissimo 2 experiments, you see both of those topics that I mentioned. If we look closer, around the bottom part of the slide, you see quite a number of data analytics approaches, also applied to manufacturing. So data analytics for camshaft manufacturing, or big data in a machine center, prognostic data from the cloud used in failure prediction for diagnostics, airframe test data for real-time analysis. So more and on the bottom left, machine learning. So more analytics, and then the other topic of multi-physics phenomena, multi-physics coupling. So we have multi-physics simulation, optimization of gas and flame, so multiple phenomena taking place, optimization projects. So those are the current Fortissimo 2 experiments. You'll find information on the web page. And complementarity means that we don't wish to see extension of such experiments, i.e. not a second version of the same thing. It may be that if we have the similar topics in different areas, that we could see that there'll be a broadening of the industrial sectors and the geographical regions being approached. That would be okay. But we really need complementarity, means to add on, to add to the set of areas being addressed. That's what we're looking for with the call. I've already mentioned this. Here's the picture we had earlier. Your experiment should include not necessarily all of those circles there, but all of them that you need to be able to perform the experiment. So it should be, in terms of execution of your experiment, it should be self-contained, and it might include HPC, big data experts, ISVs already included in the Fortissimo 2 consortium. We'll come back to the funding boundary conditions later. But one point to be made is that the experiments will be using the existing Fortissimo HPC infrastructure, so we won't be using external infrastructure. So you do need to be discussing with one or several of the HPC centers involved in the project. So the first link you see there, the partnering link, shows you the various HPC centers in Fortissimo 2, and there is information about all the Fortissimo partners in the second link. Now going into details about the call. This time we will be applying a strict condition on the number of pages that are included in proposals. So the content of the proposal, the internal proposal, should be maximum 10 pages. That means there will be a cover page and 2 pages of administrative data, but the rest of it should be maximum 10 pages. So in total, with those cover page and administrative pages, the maximum page count is 13, and the proposals will be truncated to that. So the reviewers, the external evaluators, will only be provided with a truncated version. So please do not go over the 10-page limit for your content. Submission is in electronic form. We ask you to submit a PDF, which with a maximum size of 5 megabytes. The tool for doing that submission can be accessed, or needs to be accessed, via the Fortissimo web page, and there you see the link for that. But if you go to the Fortissimo web page, look for the calls information, and then you'll find your way through to the place where you can submit. The call has been open since 18th of February. The submission deadline is 18th of May. So 18th of May at 1700 Brussels local time, and at that point the submission procedure will be closed. There is no possibility to submit after that deadline. This slide is rather complicated, but the funding boundary conditions are slightly more complicated than they were in Fortissimo, because the way this is handled in Horizon 2020 has changed. So in the past, in Fortissimo, the participants in an experiment were added to the project as beneficiaries, as partners. That is not the model being followed in Horizon 2020. Instead, they will be included as third parties. So they will sign a contract with the coordinator of the project, which is the University of Edinburgh. They will not become beneficiaries to the grant agreement. That has an advantage that the administrative overhead can be handled by the project, and we don't need to go through the administrative procedures that in Brussels, which were seen to be politically correct, I would say highly stressed by the volume of experiments that we have in Fortissimo. So the research executive agency in Brussels wasn't really up to handling the volume of participants we have in a project like Fortissimo. That's not going to happen in Fortissimo 2. The new partners will be third parties to the project, third parties to the University of Edinburgh. However, what we'll be doing is we'll be applying the same funding model as if they were project beneficiaries. So the funding will be exactly the same as for an innovation action as if you were applying for a project straight to the Commission. So please check those. In particular, that means that industrial organizations will receive 70% of their overall costs, so the direct plus fixed rate indirect costs, and research organizations will receive 100%. But check the standard rules for Horizon 2020. Those will be what we apply. The overall funding for the Core 1 that is available for third parties is 1.31 million euros. An individual experiment will not be given funding that exceeds 250,000 euros. That funding covering both third parties and any existing Fortissimo 2 beneficiaries that you may include. There is then a boundary condition that is applied by the European Commission, or in our grant agreement this has been fixed, that the maximum funding available for any single third party, and that fund is 150,000 euros across all experiments in which that third parties are involved. So if you apply, for example, you put in a proposal for an experiment in this call and one in the next, the total funding maximum funding you could receive, your organization as a new third party, is 150 across both experiments. The same applies to multiple proposals to a single call. The final boundary condition is that, as you will see in the templates, when you put the proposal together, and I've mentioned you can have both third parties and existing beneficiaries, you will need to detail the funding for all of them and separately report on them, and then the funding that is available for existing beneficiaries for the whole call may not exceed 25% of the funding assigned. So that's something that the project will manage, but you should be aware of that that 25% is the maximum that existing beneficiaries will be able to get from the overall call. The final point related to the contracts will be when would you expect the experiments to be running? Well, we hope to be able to finish the evaluation over the summer period and handle the conclusion of the third-party contracts such that the experiments would start in 1st of November 2016, and they will execute for 18 months. There is a lot of information available on the web page. And you can find those all via the URL there. There's a background text which explains the framework in which we're funded and what we're looking for in the introduction. There's intentionally some overlap with the guideline for proposers. So the proposers guide explains what the evaluation criteria are, what the objectives are, what the expectations are for experiments, in much more detail than I've been able to give you today. We have then a template, if you like, or an exemplar, which we recommend you use. It's a Word document, and we recommend that you take that to create your proposal. We've then got a checklist reiterating some of the objectives and the priorities. That checklist will be given to the evaluators as well. So you can see what it is we're telling the evaluators that they should look at as priorities for their evaluation. So we're trying to be very open about that. You can see what we're telling them they should be looking for. And that should be guiding you to what information you should be providing and how you should be defining your proposal. And then, in addition, we have a number of frequently asked questions covering quite a number of the points that I've already discussed today. Okay, I will leave that up. Those are the presentation slides I had. I'm very happy to take any questions you may have. I will maybe put up the participants list. So apologies for the grey box, but then I can see who's talking. Any questions?
Please remember you are on mute. If you need to talk, you need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Ask a question, please.
Yep.
It's David Brown here. It's the use of the facilities, the HPC facilities. So we can't go to the general marketplace. We need to go to your existing partners. Is that correct?
That's correct. We won't be using, I don't know what you're planning with general marketplace, but just let's pick on somebody as an example. We don't expect people to be taking Amazon Web Services as their platform. We would expect you to be working with one of the Fortissimo HPC centers using their resources, or resources on multiple platforms. That's within the infrastructure. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Hi, this is Cecilia Soriano from Simne.
Hello. Hi.
I joined the call a little bit later, so maybe you already mentioned it, that I have this doubt. Being this an I4MS kind of call or project, all the experiments should have to do about an application on manufacturing.
Well, what we've done in the core text, which you see, is we've asked for engineering and manufacturing,
Okay.
so which is somewhat broader.
Okay. And if in the consortium, if we have a consultancy, for instance, who develops this code and they want to port it to an HPC so that it will be more useful for the work that they have to do for their clients, do we need would that be an end user, or because they don't? It's the in-house code. They don't plan to sell it. They sell the use of the results obtained from that.
Well, if in-house codes are perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm.
The focus would be if that end user uses that in-house code for solving his business problems, then that will be the motivation. And we'd say, okay, this is an end user that's using whatever code, and he may be getting your support to be able to deploy that on an HPC system. Mm-hmm. A side comment would be, we're typically not funding. We're not looking to fund major code development, so starting from scratch to say I need to develop a new code. So we're looking to be solving the business problems, and so what you'd have to emphasize is this is the business problem this organization has. We're going to address that, or we're going to help their business by allowing them to use their software on an HPC system. It doesn't need to be that the business case does not need to be that they sell the software, but we'd be looking what's the impact, what are the business benefits for that organization? How does it get them? How does it help them be more efficient, be more effective?
Okay, perfect. Crystal clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, this is Anil Kumar Dave.
Hello, hi.
Hi, I wanted just to ask one thing. How startups will be treated? I mean, are they eligible to participate as far as they are very small scale SMEs, or there is a sort of willingness to have already established SMEs on?
We'd be keen to see startups as well. I think the only issue would be whether or not the startup would be in a stable financial situation to be able to commit resources to perform the experiment. So let's take the extremes. A micro SME would be, maybe it's only one person, and if that person had to commit full-time activities to the project of the experiment, there would be a question about whether it would be in a financial position to actually perform the work. As I mentioned, the funding model for industrial organizations is that you get 70% of the overall cost, so direct cost plus 25% indirect, which is total below 100% of cost plus indirect costs. So that would be a question. But of course, if the startup can actually clearly demonstrate we have the financial stability to perform the work and it doesn't have a negative impact on our business, that's okay. That is in line with the way the Commission would evaluate whether small companies are able to participate in projects. But yes, new startups are new to HPC will be clearly of interest.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello. My name is Harry Gonzalez. I'm calling from Paragon. I have a couple of questions. One question is that we're referring to the slide about the initial Fortissimo 2 experiments. Looking at some of the areas and having also looked at the Fortissimo website, is information on those experiments on the website yet, or no?
I believe so, yes, but in probably only very compact form. The Uli Becker-Lemgauer was on the call, and he's our information dissemination manager. He may be able to answer.
I can make a comment on that one. All information on all the experiments that are currently taken under Fortissimo or Fortissimo 2 are on the web page. It's true that for those that are still running, the information is rather compact, but the information given is enough to judge where the experiment is coming from, which kind of experiment actually, what kind of goal is followed in this experiment. So we believe the information given here is sufficient to find experiment regions that are different from those that we're currently undertaking.
Okay. The reason I asked this is because I see from most of the experiments that there's a focus that HPC is a big enabler with respect to very expensive testing and development time. So my question is that whether in Fortissimo HPC can also be seen as an enabler to enable access to such tests and such facilities, but then coupling to the latter aspect of also creating models. So, I mean, to actually do for experimental facilities or live tests the same that the current experiments are saying, that we use HPC to reduce testing costs and such. So is this applicable also to the actual experiments or facilities doing so?
I would imagine, without knowing exactly what you're perhaps planning, I would imagine that the data analytics aspect would very much work in relation to test data setups. I mean, what we see here, I'll just get rid of this. Okay, the grey box should have disappeared. One of these is analysis there from test data. So I don't have the details about what they're planning, but I would imagine that that also links to what the sort of thing you're talking about, integrating test data and modeling data, big data inside a machining center. So I think the data analytics aspect would certainly be a mechanism that brings that together. It may also be just thinking aloud that simulation linked to the use of using test data in simulation or simulation workflows may also be relevant. I'm not just sure how that works. As I said, it's just thinking off the top of my head.
Well,
so that might also be an aspect. Yeah.
Well, we could see to refine that, because that brings me to my last question. In the call, as you mentioned, it is specified that one of the HPC centers in Fortissimo must be used in any proposal. So what is not clear, or I don't know if I missed this in the text, is how exactly do we approach the HPC centers? Is there some sort of procedure for this, or we have to submit abstracts or something like that? How does this actually work?
It's there are contact details on the web page, so you could actually look at the web page. Let me do this live and see if it works. Okay, so if you go to that link, you see a number of the actual HPC centers there, and there should be. I'll pick one at first. I'll pick the first one. There should be contact details.
Okay, so we contact them directly.
You contact them directly,
there's no
you
procedure in place for that.
You can contact the general calls information, and we will ask somebody to get in touch with you. So,
okay.
So either directly, or you go straight to the either directly or via us. I'm just looking for the email address, but I should have put it in the slides. Here you go. So you can contact ff2-calls@fortissimo-project.eu.
Okay.
So either or.
Okay.
We'll get in
All right.
touch. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Sorry, can I come back in again? David Brown here.
Yes, indeed.
Now, we haven't been successful with EU bids in the past, so it's a fundamental question. Do we need to have 3 different organisations in 3 different countries in Europe?
Not at all in this case. The reason being that we cover the European aspect as a project as a whole. So the project as a whole covers that, and it's actually intended that, or it's quite normal for an experiment to have all its participants from one country. There are often language issues that make that effective, but it's absolutely not a problem to have all the participants from one country.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm Georgia. I'm from the University of Liverpool. And I have a few questions regarding a little bit the costing. Can we include any license fees in the costing or travel expenses? And also, are there any specific finance forms beyond the one that you have in the example proposal, the European Union, or that's the proposal now?
So the proposal you see is complete as it is. You don't need to complete any other forms for the proposal submission, because you will become third parties to the University of Edinburgh. You will be signing a contract with them. So you won't be going into signing a contract with the European Commission. So that means it may be that later, when we get to the contract phase, that the University of Edinburgh has to request quite a lot of information that would normally be put into the Commission's NEF system, the participant portal system, but you won't be going into the grant agreement. So the template document you have, it contains everything you need to fill in for the proposal, no additional forms. And then later, there may be additional information that you need to provide, contact details, legal contacts, etc., etc. But that's at the moment of the proposal. You just have the document that the template you have. Concerning costs, the thing, you should in fact cover all costs that are needed. It's included in the template. There's an explanation of the computing costs, how those are calculated. So with the HPC Centre, you need to talk to them all. How many core hours am I expecting to use, or what's my framework? What budget would I need? So you need to account for those. Software license costs. You should also include, if you need to buy external licenses, you should include them in your costing. It's not usually expected that participants, and it's usually not acceptable that inside the experiment that the participants use commercial rates for software between themselves. So if you've got one of your partners would not normally be selling you at commercial rates software licenses. It's very normal that the partner would provide the software at fee-free. It's just saying it's a normal thing to do. But if you're having to use external software, then you should include those costs in your budget. Yes. Did that answer your question?
Yes, of course. And also regarding any travel costs, that can also this be included, or in a minimum.
Yeah, you should include the travel costs as well. In the FAQ we try and give an indication of what sort of travel we would expect. So we would expect the experiment to have to attend a review by the European Commission, and maybe also an additional meeting. So probably 2 European trips should be covered that the project would need from you. And then if you need to have more trips because your partners are in multiple countries or spread out across the country that you're in, you should usually include those costs.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. And one final question that I have is that you mentioning that the experiments in the guide, you mentioned that the experiments should consider how they can develop services developed in the marketplace and afterwards can be used by other end users. So how we can approach that? How we can include this in the proposal?
I think what you would explain is that what your intention is. If your intention is to develop a service, for example, it may be that an ISV or a new small ISV or whatever says, I'm working with this end user in the case of, I'm looking at my desk, plastic water bottle manufacturing, right? Just because it's on my desk at the moment. And I'm going to try out with this end user the fact that I can use HPC simulation to do optimized filling of water bottles with him. So that end user gets a benefit and has an advanced option, but the ISV then says, but I'm interested in offering that remote computing service to other bottle manufacturers or water manufacturers. And that's the sort of thing you could explain. This is our intention. We would develop the service, investigate whether it can be put into the marketplace, work with Fortissimo to do that, and our intention is that to make that service available for other users beyond the lifetime of the project. So
this comment is mainly for ISVs. It's not for the SMEs that they want to run an experiment for a specific case. Or are you asking also the SME somehow to make a generic service?
Not if it's not in their business model. Yeah, if the SME is somebody that actually, you know, we saw the ones from steel manufacturing. They would normally not be providing services. Actually, I took a bad example. We did have a manufacturing SME in copper forming, and they actually saw an advantage in perhaps offering the same service to some of their competitors. But actually, it would be perfectly valid to say, well, I manufacture steel, that's my business, I'm looking for a service that solves my needs, and we wouldn't expect a steel manufacturer to be providing software services.
Yes, I mean, in this case, there might be an IP issue, so the company might not want to release their intellectual property.
So I missed the,
all I said is that there might be an IP problem, intellectual property problem, so the company might not want to release what they have developed to competitors.
Okay, then that's part of their business plan, and there's no requirement for you to deploy services.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we would expect you to explain whether or not it's valid, and many cases that we've seen, provision of services would be valid and would be a useful thing for partners in the experiments to do.
Okay, thank you a lot.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay. Other questions?
Hello, Matthias.
Hi, good morning.
Here. Oh, I'm sorry. You go first.
Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Jose from Minicom in Spain. I would like to know which are the conditions to be considered a mid-cap, please. It's a tricky one, I think.
It's a very tricky one, yes. There are some guidelines. Yeah, I don't have a slide on that. I think you're clearly a mid-cap if you're not an SME. Oh, no, sorry. If you're not SME, then you may well be a mid-cap. And if you are not, I'll pick on somebody. If you're not Airbus, then you may well be in a mid-cap. I think that the point to be made would be to explain this is, put it in the proposal, this is the size of the company, this is our turnover, we consider ourselves a mid-cap because of. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a clear definition from the European Commission, what they were referring to when they were looking for the inclusion of mid-caps within the Factories of the Future framework. So I think the thing is to say, well, this company size has a need for using external resources because it doesn't have everything in-house, and justify it in that way. I think it's quite clear that if we take some of the large automotive companies, they're not really mid-caps. They have their own resources in-house. They are very large corporations. They would not fall under any normal definition of mid-cap. But unfortunately, I don't have a realistic mid-cap definition for you. Apologies for that.
Okay, thank you. I understand.
So there was somebody else had a question just before?
Yes, Matthias Bauer speaking here. I have a question about the software which is already available in the Fortissimo project. Is there a list of software which we can access and use for experiments?
There's not yet a list of services that will be offered in the marketplace. I don't believe we have a concentrated list of software. Uli, maybe I ask you, do we have that someplace? I don't think so.
So what would be the way to approach the Fortissimo project? Should we propose to bring in like OpenFOAM or and find someone who will provide OpenFOAM?
Okay, well, that's probably a good example. We have a number of experiments using OpenFOAM and a number of centres with expertise in using OpenFOAM that have OpenFOAM deployed on their systems. So in that case, I'd say have a look at the HPC centres and see what they're offering. There is at the Fortissimo marketplace a very first version which has some information about competences, and OpenFOAM competence is one of those. But I would suggest you either look at the HPC centre's information. If they mention the codes you're looking for, then you can contact them directly. Otherwise, you can contact the FF2 calls list, and we would distribute such requests over to the HPC centres. Just to be clear, Scarpos manages and Intel are being supportive of that. We manage the open calls. We don't get involved in any of the experiment preparation things, so we're very much independent of that, but we would pass on the information to say this is somebody interested in access to OpenFOAM, get in touch with them if you're interested. Or you decide which centre you would like to work with because of their resources, because of their expertise, and you contact them directly.
Okay, so there's not all software available everywhere, and we have to go through all of these centers to find where's the best place to do experiments.
But I think you'll find OpenFOAM, as that example, is probably available nearly everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, may I ask another question maybe, which is about the funding. Would it be okay, for example, to include validation costs in the experiment? A, and B, is it appropriate to include subcontracting for code development, if we take the example for OpenFOAM?
So A, you mentioned validation costs. So are you thinking about experimental validation?
Yeah, there's the development or the manufacturing of something, and they're doing it at the moment by experiments, and they would like to run a simulation, a coupled physics simulation, and the idea is, can we include the validation costs, for example, measurements to compare our numerical results against in this Fortissimo call, or is this purely numerical experiments?
No, that's perfectly acceptable that you'll be able to validate the impact for the end user by saying, well, look, this is what we can. The simulation can do it, and it gives you the information you need. That's perfectly valid. I think in practice it will be an issue of what volume of budget is being put into validation and what being put onto the rest. You know, if it was 95% validation costs, then obviously we'd say, well, you know, this doesn't focus on the use of HPC and the benefits of HPC because it's experimental research experiment. Yeah? But I suspect you're not proposing that. But no. So having validation work in to say I'm going to show to the end user that what we're delivering to him really solves his problem is perfectly okay. Development work on the code, subcontracting, you should, there'll be two options. Either you would include the person the company you were thinking about subcontracting as a partner, and they would provide funding, or you would do it under your cost, but you very clearly describe those costs in the proposal. So you would say, we need this function to be developed, it's not otherwise available, we will be subcontracting to company X or whatever, and these are the costs. So be very clear about that in your proposal.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, I have one last question, if I may. One thing that's also not clear is that do you have to have specifically a separate end user per experiment? I mean, can actual service providers like experimental facilities be regarded as end users because the experiments they do for clients is not industry specific. It could be automotive, it could be aerospace, it could be electronics, something like that. So must there necessarily be a separate SME or mid-cap end user per the experiment, given the constraints of the budget?
I'm just jumping back here. I think where that would play a role would be demonstrating the business impact in terms of engineering manufacturing. So if it would be a great deal easier if you had an exemplary end user of the technology service that you're developing to show what the business impact for them is. If you had a generic testing institution, it would be more difficult for them to explain, possibly more difficult for them to explain the business impact, but I wouldn't rule it out. I just think it would be very much clearer for the evaluators to say, okay, this testing center covers the following industrial sectors and we're going to try it out with well, let's go back to my plastic bottle manufacturer that I mentioned earlier because it's still on my desk. But it will be up to you to make the case and proposal. It's not a must, but it would certainly be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Alfonso Lopez from Spain. I have two questions. I come from an HPC center, and can we participate in our proposal as a HPC provider, or is mandatory that the HPC provider belongs to the Fortissimo consortium?
We are looking for experiments that use the existing HPC facilities, so we're not looking for new HPC providers.
Okay, yes. So, for example, we can participate, but with another role, for example, HPC expert or.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is. The companies must pay the 30% of the budget, doesn't it? So can the companies pay that 30% with personal cost instead of money? I don't know if
So the way it works is the following: you will budget for particular activities.
Mm-hmm.
And when you typically receive an advance payment so you're not working first and then being paid afterwards, and then at some point you will have to justify your costs. So my company is a beneficiary of the project, and we do that for the commission. So what we have to do is report on the personnel costs we had, travel costs, any other costs, and then we submit a cost claim to the commission for the project. And on top of the direct costs, the personnel costs, travel costs, we receive 25% overhead costs. They're called indirect costs in the commission. Mm-hmm. So I have 125% of the costs, and if those costs are accepted, then I receive funding equal to 70% times that those accepted costs. So it's not the case that I have to pay money in, it's just that I receive less funding than the costs that I have justified. Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps it was my mistake because I didn't. My question wasn't good. But will it be possible to specify more personal cost in order to so that the 30% is equivalent to those that you don't receive? Perhaps it's better to write the question by email.
Yeah, you can do that, but essentially you would put in more effort than you were funded for. But that's the normal model. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Further questions from anybody?
A question?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
I see that you look for simulation of a coupled phenomena. So, for example, I saw some example that, in my understanding, wasn't coupled phenomena. For example, a CFD of a car design is not a coupled phenomena, if I understand well. Can you give me some examples of coupled phenomena you expect to be simulated in the code?
Well, the short answer would be we're not prescriptive, so there are no specific targets. But when I showed, sorry, you should never. This one here we saw earlier. This is in the Fortissimo project. This was the previous project. So the target for Fortissimo was to look at simulation and modeling. So this was clearly, you're right, not as a coupled simulation. But in the current set, we have here aeroacoustics, which is a combination of fluid dynamics and acoustic modeling, which I think would count as coupled phenomena. Here we have multiphysics simulation of multiphysics. So co-simulation or fluid structure interaction would clearly be multi-phynomena. I think if we look at gas and flame detectors, we may have multi-physics simulation codes involved there. I don't unfortunately know the detail. So there are a number where you can say, well, it's not just about fluid structure interaction. It's any sort of multi couple phenomena. So it could be workflows. It could be complex applications that requiring multiple simulation phases.
And it could be using two different codes or using a unique code that is able to manage two different physical properties or two different quantities.
I think that's absolutely up to you. You just need to explain this is why we are addressing couple phenomena. These are the couple phenomena that we have, and this is the approach we're going to have to solve them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Other questions? Good. Then, if not, I would thank you for your interest, and thank you for the quite a large number of relevant questions. I think it's often helpful for other people to listen to those questions, and it resolves some of the thoughts that they may be having. So that's very helpful. Thank you for your participation. If there are no other questions, I would hand back to our host at Innovalia to close the meeting.
Well, thank you very much, Guy, and thank you all for participating in this webinar. I hope to see you in further webinars and open calls of I4MS. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, and I hope that you will distribute the slides to the ones who had registered.
I think we can organize that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for all the explanations.
You're welcome. Good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.